episode of GotHunts.com Outdoors International. You're going to hear me interview Clay Owens, who's one of the nation's leading experts on calling coyotes, and that's evidenced by the fact that he, basically qualifies very well in all the coyote calling contests and, that sort of thing that go around. So it's not just him or me or that ever. I wanted to get some really good information on coyotes, and so we went everything through all the different seasons, and you're going to hear him talk about calling strategies and setup strategies and whys and hows, and the podcast is really, really good, and it was so good, in fact, and so informative for me, who's kind of a coyote calling rookie, that I asked Clay if he'd be willing to do a video on just kind of some of his techniques. And so when you get to the end of this, if you're as impressed as I was with Clay and his wealth of knowledge and you want to know more, just look in the show notes and you will find a link to the YouTube video that'll kind of be a free coyote calling 101 strategies and just more information that we could capture on both camera and audio. So feel free and go there and enjoy the podcast for today, and I think you're going to love it. It is time to talk some coyotes with a coyote stud. Now, the cool part is that I have on staff at Outdoors International, one of our agents is one of the top guys in the country at calling coyotes, and that's evidenced by the fact in competing in the last 2 years in the world, he's finished in the top 10, and this is not guys standing on a stage and trying to sound the best in front of 4 human beings. This is guys out in the field trying to kill the most coyotes using their calling techniques. So it's not only calling, it's all the strategy and know-how and all that good stuff. So when it comes down to it, it's safe to say this guy's in the top 10 in the world at calling coyotes. And the cool part is he's an agent with us at Outdoors International. Now, for those of you who are new listeners and don't know what we do, GotHunts.com, Outdoors International, what we are is the largest online only hunt consulting firm in the world. And so what that means is we're the guys you call if you want to go on an elk hunt in the West, or a whitetail hunt in Illinois, or an African Cape buffalo, or anywhere else out there, Argentina, Alaska, Canada, New Zealand, all the places in the world you've dreamt of hunting. You now have one person you can call, and we don't cost you any more to book your hunts through. We're a free service to you. We get paid on the back end as a referral fee from the outfitters that we choose to work with. So we're just the guys you call to make sure you're with the right guy, which, especially when you're starting to hunt off this continent, is just a giant guessing game. So you can either guess or call us, your preference. So we look forward to being helpful on that level, but let's talk coyotes, guys. I mean, it's time, right? It's something that we need to be doing to manage the predator population, help out deer and elk in general, and go out and have some fun in the winter when nothing else is open, and collectively, keep some people warm by putting some skins on their back. So without further ado, I am going to invite on our guest today, whose name is Clay Owens. Now, again, Clay's one of our agents, and he's just a stud coyote caller. Clay, thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to talking coyotes.
Me too. Now, you and I were talking a little bit before we kind of dove in, and you were talking about, well, for the guys that don't know, because I don't know, tell me about what I see the stuff on Facebook. I see the guys that are usually in pairs, and as I understand it, right, you're on the field staff for FoxPro. And you're on the field staff for Specialized Dynamics. So we're going to talk some guns, and we're going to talk some calling, and we're going to talk some strategy, all kind of wrapped around coyotes. But at the same time, and you live in Nebraska, correct?
That is correct. I recently moved to Nebraska from Colorado, maybe, say a year and a half ago, not quite 2 years ago.
But not that it's the same kind of country you grew up in, really, or that you've been hunting a lot. I mean, you're in basically a big 4 to 5 hour circle radius, but you're still within that where you live currently, correct?
That is correct. Yeah, I'm not too far from where I moved from in Colorado, but different scenario as far as the coyote hunting terrain. It's a lot easier to call coyotes in the plains than it was in the mountains, but
why?
I think it's because coyotes aren't the top of the food chain in the mountain country. They got bears and they got mountain lions to deal with, and so they're a little more cautious when they come to the call. You can still call them, and I had plenty of success in Colorado in the mountains calling, but in the plains states, they're basically they're the top of the list. So they just react differently. They charge in a lot harder. They're not as I guess they're not as cautious as a whole. Now, obviously, coyotes are they're tricky by nature. They're super smart. You're not going to beat them every time. In fact, you're probably not going to beat them 50% of the time. They're going to make a fool of you, and that's what makes it fun.
Super cool. Wow. See, I've never taken coyotes to the next level. I just haven't. You know, generally, I'm kind of a traditional hunting season guy. You know, fall, spring, summer times when I pack in with my family into the backcountry and do the high mountain lake thing. Winters when we do a lot of skiing, so I don't hunt a ton of predators. I've just, you know, I mean, you know how it is. To take anything to the next level, you need that magical component, which is time. And I've just, that time of year, it's always just been kind of a go when I can, go occasionally, you know, yip howl in a coyote when I'm bow hunting when I see one. So I've whacked a few with my bow, but I know nothing. So it's going to be kind of fun because I don't know shit. You're going to be able to teach me and the people listening that may already know some and have some advanced skills that they're going to learn, and some of us just getting down to the basics. So now again, you've gone out to the plains, and you're calling plains coyote, and we're going to want to be conscientious to kind of speak about strategies that I think you find effective in both, right? Because I think the plains coyotes are going to be, you know, basically everything east of the Mississippi it's going to apply, or I mean, east of the west, right? So everything Midwest and out to the east is probably going to fairly apply to the plains strategies, and then we're going to speak in mountain strategies. When you say that's pretty, I mean, yeah. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate. You know, there's a lot of argument in the coyote hunting community that eastern coyotes, that's east of the Mississippi River, are this like super advanced, way smarter coyote than the coyotes in the west.
Okay, all right. Do you agree?
Not really. I mean, I've called coyotes in Tennessee, and they came to the call the same as the coyotes I call in Nebraska or Colorado, California, different places that I called. They all come to the call. Just you gotta practice good woodsmanship, and you got to be, you know, you got to understand your prey. These guys are out there surviving 365 days out of the year. So at any given time, they're going to outsmart you. And I think that, say, the eastern coyotes, they live in super populated areas. It just makes them a little more wary of people. But they have triggers, and those triggers are, they're either territorial and they want to fight, or they want to you know, procreate. So if you do female invitation house, those kind of things, they'll come to those. Or ultimately, their stomachs. You figure out what they're eating or what maybe they want to eat, and you try to make that sound and bring them into the call. I mean, it's not rocket science. It's more patience and woodsmanship, work in the wind. You know, it's the same as hunting anything else. You got to do your homework, and you've got to put in the time.
So basically you're saying that coyotes are susceptible to sex, food, and mixed martial arts, right?
That is correct.
Awesome.
That's it in a nutshell.
Well, good. So they're the same as we are. So at least we can understand that.
That's right. I mean, really, every animal on the planet has got three functions, and that's eating, sex, survival. Yeah. That's it. You know, at what level you handle those things is when the last guy is standing, he wins.
Sure. Super cool. Well, okay, so let's so now we've spoken about, and I would agree. I mean, you know, I've probably the most extensive I've hunted the U.S. is actually for turkeys, right? And so I've hunted turkeys in almost 20 states, and I used to be fanatical about them. I used to make big loops through the country and just, you know, hop from place to place to place, and I found that turkeys had different idiosyncrasies, but for me it mostly involved pressure, right? Yeah, of course, a Rio's a little different than a Merriam and that sort of thing, but not hugely. It was more just kind of where they where their habitat was and how they traveled. That's what varied based on species. But in terms of temperament, that seemed to vary more based on pressure, right? I mean, I was quite amazed to see that turkeys in some areas of the United States, illegal or not, were hunted year round. And, that I would see turkeys, go on the run from a rig at 500 yards, and I just had never seen that before out here, So I saw a lot of that difference on pressure. So do you think that carries through potentially, in the East, that they get more hunting pressure?
I think that, I don't know that it's necessarily hunting pressure as far as it is just pressure. I mean, it's just, there's so many people out there in the East.
Mm-hmm.
They're always having some sort of interaction with people, and it may or may not be a pleasurable interaction. And so, yeah, I mean, a lot of times when people see coyotes, they just start shooting at them, whether they're driving down the road or if they're, working with cattle and they have a coyote come into their pasture close to their house or something like that. They're getting shot at. So, yeah, they're under scrutiny all the time, and so I think that's probably a lot of it.
Okay.
Now, as far as calling in the East and so forth, the coyote numbers are booming everywhere, and in certain parts of this country, that being the eastern part of the United States, where there weren't coyotes historically, even 50 years ago in large numbers. I mean, the population is booming, and so.
And you know that from a biologist, not just hunter lore.
Yeah, there's studies around, and I've read some of them that they talk about. There were coyotes, but not in the massive numbers that there are now. There's big numbers in places now that there didn't historically used to be coyotes, and so.
And has that kind of, what do you know what's the cause? Has that gone hand in hand with food source? I mean, has the number of, because the number of white-tailed deer, fluctuates, but as an overall is higher than it has been in the past. So
I'm not exactly sure why that is. I mean, they're adaptive as could be. They can survive on anything. They will live anywhere. And like I said, they can survive on any kind of food. They'll eat carrots or fruit, vegetables, meat, rabbits, deer. So wherever they build their camp, they seem to flourish. And so, I think that the East is clearly got a massive food source for them. Lots of rabbits, lots of deer, and so they do well there.
Interesting. Okay. Well, cool. Okay. So, the only question I really asked you, Clay, now how old are you, Clay?
I'm 44 years old.
Okay, old man. I'm 45. No, so I'm going to call you the youngster. But anyway, so tell me, youngster, how long have you been hunting coyotes? I mean, it seems like you've been predator hunting for a long time, because you talk about, so you guys know, in terms of the people who are listening, Clay on our staff is such an unbelievable resource for the state of Colorado and the surrounding areas. I mean, this guy has worked on more ranches and worked for more big outfitters and ran operations. I mean, he's a stud, and that's where we kind of scooped him up from, is that, we sent a lot of clients his way in an operation that we dealt with, and he did such a tremendous job, and he was great to deal with on the phone, and he kind of came to us, and we came to him at the same time, and here we are. He's one of our agents at the same time. He's just got a wealth of information. But let's go back to that question. You've been, after predators, calling bears and cougars and coyotes for a long time. Am I right?
Yeah, that is right. I grew up on a cattle ranch, and it was always a struggle dealing with coyotes growing up. With my dad and my older brother, we called some. A lot of times we were just opportunistic. We'd see coyotes out in our cows or whatever, we'd shoot them. And back then when I was a kid, furs were really worth a lot. So we trapped, and we killed a few coyotes coming to the call. Nothing at the level I'm at now, but it slowly morphed into, as I got older and I started managing some of these big hunting operations and different things, they coincided with helping them with their predator control. Like the last couple ranches I've managed for their big game hunting operations in Colorado, I also took care of a lot of their predator control. And so I had to elevate my game to, be more proficient with the call. And so probably somewhere around 2002, 2003, I really started getting super in tune with calling all the time. I mean, I got to where I was very good at it. I called a lot of coyotes, and it helped the ranch because, obviously our lamb numbers and our calf numbers were coming up, and we weren't seeing the death loss due to predation like we were. We also had to learn how to, call bears and different things like that, doing some of that damage control work. And so that just has morphed into, going to coyote calling contests and becoming involved with the FoxPro, and it's really turned into a cool thing for me, because now not only do I get to go call coyotes for fun, I also get to have some income off of that at a level of that I never thought I would probably get a chance to.
That is cool. That is cool. Well, let's talk it, because you mentioned it. I think it's important for those of, especially the younger listeners, that, back in the day before the fur trade was crappy. I remember my dad, paying for all our gas on hunting trips because we could shoot a couple of coyotes. Right. I mean, he knew nothing about skinning them and taking care of them or anything. He'd just take them in, and hand him the dogs, and the guy would hand him cash. And I can't remember because I was a kid, but it seems like I remember he'd make like $50 to $70 a dog on. Does that sound accurate, or does that?
Yeah, back then in the late 70s, early 80s even. I can remember my dad making $120, $150 for a coyote, and that was put up, and they did those kind of things.
What does it go for today?
A good coyote today, on the dog, not put up, because I don't do that anymore. You're lucky if you can get, in my area, if you can get $30 or $40 for a coyote, which is still awesome if you can kill a lot of them. Yeah. But, it'd be way cooler to get 100 than 30. But
of course it would. Yeah.
I got to be honest with you. I'm not in it for the money.
Right.
It's a bonus, but and I'm just in it for the fun. I love it. I love calling coyotes. I love going out and trying to beat them at their game, because they're way better at it than we are.
Especially the big old dogs, just like everything else. I mean, people always ask, well, why are, why do you like to hunt, trophy hunt? That's this big, thing, and everybody's all uptight about it and shit. The reality is that those of us that choose to take this passion to the next level enjoy not only the management side of pulling the adult non-breeders out of the population and as a conservation tool, especially in the ungulates, but at the same time, it's just it's the challenge of killing the smart old dog, right? I mean, it's that part of it, and I'm not going to apologize for that. Whatever.
Yeah, I'm not either. I mean, we all kill our share of the young ones, but there's really something to be said about killing the old scarred up warrior that, he's managed to live to be 7 years old, and he's put in his time, and he's maybe been called in a few times and beat you, but when you finally win and you get that old guy, I mean, it's an accomplishment, man. They're smart. Like I said,
it is. Yeah, it's cool.
They beat us way more than we beat them.
How old is an old coyote?
I don't know what maybe the oldest one recorded is. I would say if they get to be 5 or 6 or 7 years old, that's pretty old. Because they're constantly they're hard on each other. I mean, they're super territorial, and they kill each other as much as anything. I mean, right. So.
Well, they get hunted by other critters. I mean, so one time, and some people might be hitting their bullshit button right now, but God's honest truth. we were glassing, and one of the strategies out here to try to kill wolves is glassing kills, right? So you're looking for magpies, you're looking for crows, and we saw some birds on a kill, and there was 2 golden eagles on it, and that's not uncommon to see on kills either. They're scavengers as well. And so after assessing all the ridge tops around and not seeing any tracks, and we felt safe to approach it just to see what had killed it and what it was, we came in and were surprised to find that once we got up in there, it was actually, and it had fresh snowed the day before, so this is for sure, and the coyote was a fresh kill. There was not a single other track other than the coyote there. Those golden eagles had actually killed that coyote.
I'll be darned. Yeah,
it was a young dog. I mean, it was this year's pup in the winter, so I mean, he was smaller, but we've all seen that video in Mongolia, those golden eagles taking what they call Mongolian wolves, which are basically the size of our coyotes, but big, mature, big ones. But yeah, I mean, they got predators as well, each other, and I'm sure they get preyed on by cougars and that kind of stuff, don't they?
Okay, right, yeah, and I kind of alluded to that earlier, with the difference between the mountain coyotes versus the plains coyotes. Yeah, back there in Colorado, they had to fight with bears and they had to fight with lions and darn sure golden eagles. Right. They harassed them plenty. They're survivors, but they take some punishment from certain places, and as many things as that get them. A car is hard on them. They travel so much they get hit by cars all the time.
Interesting. Yeah. Huh. Well, again, that's why I had you on. I was like, dude, we got to talk coyotes because, I know you know tons I don't. So let's pull back just a little bit. And so we talked about fur. We talked about kind of some strategies and some things that we're going to take advantage of. The only question I asked you to kind of come prepared with was 3 things that are an absolute must to master if you're going to be a good coyote caller. And before we go into detail into each, because I know those are going to lead us down a lot of roads, what are those 3 things that you think somebody needs to master? And if we left one off and it's 4 or it's 5, correct me. I don't know what the hell. So tell me, what's the number one most important thing to master if you're going to be a good coyote hunter?
If you're going to be a good coyote hunter, you need to master good woodsmanship. You can't just blunder into places and expect to call coyotes. It's just like anything else you do. You need to put the time in scouting. I scout probably 75% of the time, and I call 25% of the time. Because when I go to a place to call, I want to make sure that there are coyotes close by so that I can utilize my time to the best of my ability. That's a number one thing. You just got to put in the time and locate coyotes and check for sign and make sure that you're in the area where they are. Because in this day and age, cold calling doesn't work that good, and I think it's a waste of time to try to cold call areas when you can put the time in to go scout. Scouting is huge.
Interesting. Okay, I wouldn't have guessed that as number one. That's cool. Okay, so and we're obviously going to go into more detail about what that looks like, but what's number 2?
Number 2 is to learn behavior of coyote, and that only comes in by calling a lot of coyotes in. You learn how to handle them as they're approaching, when to make certain sounds and when not to make certain sounds, because there's times when you can make the wrong noise while you're calling. Maybe it's a distress sound or maybe it's a vocalization. It stops them in their tracks and they're not going to come in any closer. And so you shoot yourself in the foot a little bit, but that one only comes by being successful and putting in the time and calling coyotes in.
Interesting. Okay. And then what's number 3?
Be a good shot.
Okay.
If you're not a good shot, then you're just going to educate them and make them hard for you to call in the next time.
Interesting. Okay. So where does calling come in this list?
I think that comes in like kind of second place, because I guess calling and handling coyotes is kind of the same thing.
That in learn coyote behavior?
Yeah, that's spend some time out there just observing coyotes, I guess. I like to go out and call them and not shoot them sometimes and just watch how they approach.
Okay. All right.
I'll do that every so often. Early fall, I'll call coyotes just to see how they react, and I won't shoot at them at all. I'll just call, see how they act, and I'll walk away.
Interesting.
Hopefully they don't get to the point where they wind you, but sometimes they do. But if you call them in a couple months later, then you don't have to worry about it necessarily.
So I'm going to actually do that because I want to break that out into its own individual deal, right? Because calling to me, I mean, has always been, whether it's geese, and those are the first things I learned how to call were geese, ducks, and turkeys, right? After turkeys, it came on to elk. And I've always been massively intrigued to talk animal, right? And to have them respond back and to have them do that has always been a super, super, super special, cool ninja Jedi type thing for me, right? It's been the next level stuff. So anything that can be called, and so I have a personal curiosity about calling and the strategy. So I'm going to actually put that as 4, so we can make sure we address that specifically. So let's go into the woodsmanship part of what you believe is critical. Now, I've heard you say it now kind of twice that you can't just go blundering into the woods. And so it sounds like to me you spend a lot of time in your scouting, not just blowing through the country, but you have a particular methodology to how you do that. So am I right in hearing that, and can you detail it?
Yeah, absolutely. The thing about woodsmanship, and you do it when you're hunting elk, you do it when you're hunting deer, you do it everything you hunt. If you're a good woodsman, you don't just walk into areas where everything that's out there that you're chasing can see you. You stay below the horizon lines. You stay off of ridge tops. You try to close your doors quietly. You don't make a lot of noise when you're going into the setups that you're going to make for hunting coyotes. The other thing is when you're scouting for them, you also make sure that you pick good areas where you have the best vantage point once you're going to make your setup. Those are all critical things. Watch the wind. Wind is huge. You can hunt with a crosswind or the wind in your face. Obviously, that's great. But you better be able to see the downwind side, too, because, any given time, those coyotes are going to work the wind. Some don't. Some just come flying in right to you. Other times, they'll work the wind from 1,000 yards. Just last week, I called in a coyote that I actually started calling, and I picked him up at 1,200 yards, and he started working the wind on me at 1,200 yards. And it took him 15 minutes to get to me, and he worked the wind from 1,200 yards, it's a really long ways for them to start cutting the wind. But from the point that I saw him, he covered approximately a half a mile to get downwind, yet only covered about 600 yards towards me. So, it was triple the distance that he covered going downwind versus coming towards the sound of the call. So,
and do you think that had something to do? I often think the assumption on a human level, because I don't know, I think we think we're pretty fucking special, is that critters are always cutting wind on us to see if it's a man. And in my personal opinion, because so many animals use scent as one of their primary ways they protect, investigate, at distance, I half the time I think a bull's cutting downwind to me to smell me and see, hey, is Joe there? Because he kicked the shit out of me last week, and is Martha, is she inflamed and ready to rip? I think he's using one of his skills at distance where he can keep himself safe, just to investigate with his nose because he's cautious, right? Not necessarily because he's cautious and thinks I'm a human. Do you think that same thing applies with coyotes? And with that particular coyote, I would ask you, do you think he cut you so far because he was savvy and thought you might be a hunter? Or what type of calling were you using? Were you using a territorial, and he might have been worried that was Joe who kicked his ass last week? What do you think there?
Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that coyote had been called before. I was actually in a place one of the walk-in areas here in Nebraska that are they're private land, but the landowners allow allow public people to come in there. It's a place that gets called a lot. I just wanted to go, try some new things out. There's no doubt that coyote had heard calls before, and that was why he cut the wind. And I've been an elk guide for a long, long time, and you kind of touched on something there. I think through the modern calls and the ease of use of them, it's made all these animals a lot more in tune with working the wind more so than they ever did before. I mean, I started calling elk when I was a kid, when diaphragm calls first came out, and you could call any bull in at any time. Now, I guarantee you, probably 80 to 90% of the bulls that you call in are cutting the wind on you, because they all have heard just about everything, and there's nothing new to them anymore. There's only so much you can do as far as the sounds of these calls, and so I think that they're definitely, all wildlife that gets called is coming in tune with the fact that there's a chance that's not actually a dying rabbit, that's not actually a coyote howling at me over there, that's not a bull elk bugling at me, or a cow elk wanting me to come tender. It's we've maybe outsmarted ourselves a little bit on this deal.
Yeah, so I get that, and at the same time, you and I still have had every year bulls that come thrashing and stomping in that are good mature bulls that surprise us, right? Yeah. And at least I know I can say I have, and
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's just so I don't think there's any rules to it, but I would agree with you that back in the day, and when I started hunting elk in my early 20s, and so. Because that's when I first picked up a bow, and I hunted elk before then, but more of a that was a species that my family just didn't really have figured out, and so we had deer figured out, but we didn't have elk. So I kind of had to break out on my own to really figure out elk, and I was intrigued by the rut, and so that's what got me to buy a bow. It was at 22 that I bought my first bow and started elk hunting, and that's kind of, never looked back. But I remember that's when, the Hyper Hot came out, and man, it was really easy just to get on and sound like, a freaking band walking through the woods, and elk would come in. They'd come running in. So,
without doubt. And that's a cool thing now. I mean, as I told you before, I've become a field staff member with FoxPro, and the FoxPro electronic calls, I mean, they are exceptional. There's other good electronic calls out there on the market, but FoxPro is, I mean, they're phenomenal. They have a great sound library, and so it allows you to, maybe utilize some sounds that not everybody's going to use. I mean, some people just consistently play dying rabbit, and that gets coyotes for them, but there's a lot of different sounds out there you can use. So kind of, you work on some of those coyotes that maybe have heard a few sounds. You play a bird distress or something like that maybe they've never heard, and it lures them in. The other really cool thing about these electronics is the sound quality of these. The download sounds are unbelievable. It makes it easy for a guy to get started, but like I said before, also you still need to practice good woodsmanship, because if you're out there and you walk into an area and just start playing some sounds. It's awesome. You call in a coyote, but you call him in straight downwind, and you're not paying attention to that area, then you kind of defeated the purpose. But the cool thing is there's so many people in the market that are willing to help other guys out, and be good ambassadors to the sport, and help people, and show them different things that work well, and it shortens up the learning curves for some of these guys.
Yeah, no. So I get it. So let's go back to woodsmanship, which is going to entail, and again I have my notes. Setup, approach. So and so let's cross scouting off the list. Let's talk about scouting in its totality, in how you scout for coyotes and what you do. What's your strategy when you're scouting for coyotes?
I like to run up and down ranch roads, 2 tracks, county roads, and you look for scat piles. Obviously, if there is snow on the ground and you see areas that have a lot of sign as far as coyote tracks. Obviously, you're in an area where the coyotes live. Another thing I like to do is I like to go howl, and see if they'll howl back at me. One of the things about coyotes is they're very vocal, which is kind of cool. Like a bull elk, you bugle at them, they bugle back. If you howl at coyotes, they howl back at you. And if you kind of pattern an area where they live, then the next time you go in there, you say, okay, I had these coyotes here next to this feedlot for 4 different times when I located them. So now the wind is out of the northwest. I'm going to set up southeast side of this feedlot, and I'm going to try to get these coyotes called in. And that's one of the biggest, most powerful tools is howling, because it kind of gives you an idea of what coyotes you got in there. If you got an old cranky male that's real territorial and he likes to bark and give you warning barks and different things like that, all the way down to a bunch of pups where you can hear, young of the year coyotes howling in a big group. You're going to be maybe getting a chance to use your shotgun on 4 or 5 coyotes versus just one lonely male coyote or something.
Interesting. Okay. All right. So when you're scouting, you use a lot of howling, you cover a lot of 2 tracks, you're looking for tracks. Anything else that the listeners need to be, and again, your goal is to locate them, know where they are, and then pick a better time, because it sounds like as a part of scouting you end up kind of unfolding that, hey, there's a human here. When you decide to hunt that located pack, you take a completely different approach in trying to slip in there and be 100% unannounced and with the right wind and from the right vantage point. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, I definitely you want to try to be as sneaky as you can. You want to not make them aware that you've been there before. If I'm howling, I mean, there's tons of howling sequences on the FoxPro that you can use to locate. I never try to play whatever I've located them with maybe 1 or 2 or 3 days beforehand. I try not to make that same howling sequence while I'm on stand. Because sometimes when you're out locating, you might locate them and howl at them, and they'll howl, and then they'll come to wherever you're at, and hopefully by then you're gone. But you don't want to do the same thing, because maybe they've gotten to the spot where you howled from and realized, oh, wait a minute here. That wasn't a coyote after all. That was, something else, whether that be man or, obviously they can't make that they don't know. They just know it's danger.
So let me ask you, so I get to make sure I'm clear on this. So when you're running these 2 tracks, you're doing it in a rig, right?
Yep. I drive them in a pickup.
And then are you literally running your howler from the rig?
Yeah, I'll stop and get out and howl.
Okay. So you don't feel like that's you're not going to educate them doing that, huh?
No, not normally. Usually you try to do it in the dark. You go out at night. Like I spend all night out howling. Just you got to be prepared to stay up late. They howl a lot at night, and that's when I try to do it. They're kind of under the cloak of darkness, if you will.
Interesting. Cool, man. Get me fired up. Okay, so anything else that you think's critical on the scouting side of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, if you got like a save dead cows or something like that, I mean, that's a shoe-in right there. If you got a dead cow or a road-killed deer or something like that, and you see that they've been working on it, that's always, I mean, you know they're not going to be any farther than a mile from that free meal. So certainly if I see something like that, I'm calling there, pretty soon. That way that I can utilize the fact that they're there, because coyotes will come from all over the place to feed on a dead cow. It's amazing how far they will come. And so if you get the opportunity to hunt a piece of property where the rancher has maybe had a cow die, and you may get a chance to kill some coyotes that don't actually even live on that guy's property. They might live 2 or 3 miles away, but they're over there working on a free meal. Because 2 coyotes can't eat an entire cow, but 15 coyotes can. And,
Sure. Okay, all right. Anything else? Is that scouting 101?
Yeah, that's always a plus. I mean, I can kind of tell you how valuable that is. I used to go hunt a ranch in Colorado where they raised organic beef, and they had a lot of death loss, and so their dead pile was enormous. And in 4 days, I killed 33 coyotes off of that dead pile. I mean, there weren't there weren't 33 coyotes living within that mile all the time, but during the winter when it was rough, they lived close by. They were tolerant of each other. Obviously, they had a pecking order of some sort, but I mean, you could kill the coyotes like crazy on that place, and so that, I mean, it kind of gives you an indication that a big food source like that will hold a lot of coyotes.
Huh. That is so interesting. All right, so that's some scouting information. Now let's talk about coyote behavior. I mean, you've talked about how much country they cover. You've talked about how they're territorial. So I'm going to try to keep you organized and ask some distinct questions. So what about the traveling nature of a coyote? Do they have a home base? Do they have a home region? Are they purely nomadic? Talk about that.
They're all of the above. There are family group coyotes or breeding pairs. They likely are going to have a home range, and that may be a 1 mile square. That might be a 5 mile square. That's kind of yet to be determined. I guess geographically it depends. It's sort of like a white-tailed deer. In a small farming area where you have a lot of population, those deer might only cover a couple miles square. But same thing with coyotes. If they have a good food source and they don't need to cover a lot of ground, they might just live in a small area their entire life. But there's other coyote groups that maybe their food source is not a big condensed area, so, or a very condensed food source, so they have to expand their range, and they got to cover more ground to find whatever it is that helps them to sustain their life. Then you have coyotes that are maybe been recently booted out of the pack, and they move till they find their area. And some coyotes they're always loners, and they're always on the move. So you periodically will find a coyote that's just moving through an area that's maybe a 2 or 3 year old male coyote that doesn't really have a home, and he's just moving around, and you might call him in by female vocalization or something like that. So yeah, it's all of the above.
What does that female vocalization sound? Is that like a yoo-hoo? Is that it?
Yeah, it's sort of similar to that. It's it's kind of a low volume, higher pitched howl is essentially all that is. It's just kind of a long, lonely, kind of a higher pitched type of a sound that you hear it out there. It's just a low moaning kind of a howl, but higher pitched, because you can tell it's a female.
Interesting. Okay, so
males will sound more deep, and they'll howl longer and louder.
Huh. Okay. And so let me ask this. In the pack dynamics, right? Because I know there are pretty interesting pack dynamics among wolves, and I know wolves better, and they may be more sophisticated in their dynamics, but kind of talk about the pack dynamics and how that relates to how you hunt them, because it sounds like you're either hunting solo or you're hunting groups. So speak about the group side of that. What do you try to know about them that helps you to hunt them?
Usually I like to try to know, if there are, pups in a group, or if they are, for whatever reason, a male and a female with young pups that are, say, maybe 6 months to a year, or if there are a couple of older ones into the pack. A lot of times the female will come in and explore things first. You'll hear the male. A lot of times he'll work around on you, so you want to be watching your back door. But the female is the one that's going to come charging in, looking for trouble. A lot of times the females are more aggressive when you're dealing with a family group than just say the male will be. Now, that's not always the case. I mean, there's no one size fits all. but primarily a lot of times the female, she's looking to defend her her children more so than the male is. I guess I would say
From other coyotes?
from other coyotes. Like
Okay.
if I'm dealing with a pack of coyotes, I'll use a lot more vocalizations than I will distress sounds as far as prey distress sounds. Now I will use pup distress because pup distress, once you get them fired up, that pup distress is about a 90% deal maker. They'll come to that just about every time because
Why? Because they think one of their pups is getting its ass kicked?
it could be that or that, you know, I mean, if you've ever watched dogs get in a fight, when one starts screaming, the rest of them jump in. If you get a pack of them.
Interesting. So was that the classic? That?
Yep, exactly. Like you shut your dog's foot in the door, and they start swallowing like that. Yep, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. They will come running and check that out just about 90% of the time.
Okay. So what about? So now we've answered kind of territorial. When you have pack tendencies, you have a tendency to use territorial and coyote utterances to attract them. In how that relates to coyote behavior, I guess speak about, okay, so in terms of sex, you're using a female call to try to attack that lone male. You're using kind of get into the breeding side of that, and breeding occurs in the spring.
Yes, early spring, late winter, January, February, early March. The kind of
Is gestation, is it like 8 weeks? Is that right?
68 days, somewhere in there, 60 some, 52, 68, somewhere in there.
Okay.
I think I'm correct on that anyways. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it is in this, I think it's 60 some days.
Okay.
Anyways, so they'll start trying to pair up. If they don't have a mate, they'll start trying to pair up in that late January through February time frame.
So this is the time of year then, are you using, breeding strategy calling right now? Is this the time when you're starting to kick that in at all, or is it, how does that change?
Yeah, you'll start using more vocalizations in the spring.
And again, when you refer to vocalizations, you're meaning coyote noises, as opposed to what you're calling distress, which is squirrel, rabbit, that kind of thing, right?
Correct. Deer, fawn, distress, those kind of things. Any of those distress sounds, you're like a rabbit or, deer, fawn. Those are you're trying to capitalize on their stomach.
Okay.
When I say vocalizations, I'm talking howling.
Okay.
Whether it be a family howling sequence or a female single howl or a male challenge howl or a female challenge howl, there's a number of vocalizations you can use. But usually during that time, I maybe just show up to a site to make my set. I may only howl 1 to 3 times, and then I'll wait 10 minutes just to see if they're going to come, and I don't make another sound. They're really exceptional at picking out exactly where you called from. So
is that an advantage then, obviously, of the FoxPro of putting it away from you, correct?
Correct. Especially out here where I live, where the wind blows quite a bit. I like to put it a ways upwind so that I can have them, focus their attention, A, where that FoxPro is, and B, if they're starting to work the wind, then you've used it two times to your advantage. A, they come to you, but they're still focused on that, or they just are going to it and they're focused solely on that noise.
Interesting. What do you find is a coyote's average kind of work the wind range? I know myself with bulls, it's in that 50 to 80 range, 50 to 100. Are they longer?
As a whole, they're probably somewhere in that 100 to 200 yard range.
Okay, all right. I get that.
Well, like I said, the one I called in the other day, he started working the wind at 1200, and
right.
I was only able to get a look at him at at 200. He finally got into shooting range, but he worked that wind, and fortunately, I was able to seal the deal. But had he had any more terrain in between the two of us, he would have beat me just based on the fact that he was working the wind from so far.
And so let me ask you, do you actually set your FoxPro off 100 yards then, or do you try to keep it closer?
It just depends on how hard the wind's blowing. If the wind's blowing pretty hard, I will set it. I'll set it quite a ways away from me. I've set it up to 200 yards away from me.
Interesting. And those little remotes will run that thing from that distance, huh?
Yeah, they will. The nice thing about a FoxPro, they work exceptionally well. Their technology is amazing. They've been building good calls for a really long time, and their R&D is exceptional. They test everything so incredibly well that they make it where those remotes, some of them will work out 400 or 500 yards. I haven't tested mine out that far, but I've talked to guys that have had them work out that far. So
interesting.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, if a guy's by himself and you're in an area, say you've called in some coyotes that you've had issues with trying to downwind you before, you might just set up and put that FoxPro way away from you and just see what happens. I mean, sometimes you just test to see what they're going to do and see what, that's the fun thing about it, is to say, okay, I called in a coyote and he beat me, but I'm going to go back out there and I'm going to try to figure out a way to get him. I mean, I did that very thing even last night. I called in a coyote a couple days ago, and my rangefinder misjudged the distance, and I shot and missed him. And I called him again 2 days later, which was last night. I called him in again, and I do know it was the same coyote because he was mangy and he had a funny little tuft of hair on his tail, so it made it where I could actually tell that it was the same coyote. And I tried him from a different angle in the pasture and was able to call him in. Took him quite a long time to get there, and he actually came in behind me, and I got him. But that's one of the things. I'm not afraid to go try a place that I've killed a coyote the same day. If I call in a double and I kill one of the two of them, I'll go back the same day and try to kill another one because I know they live there. Right. And if you beat them, it's awesome. If you don't, you just say, well, I didn't win this time, but I'm gonna go back at it. And that's the fun thing about it. That's why I do it. I mean, I like to just see if I can have the skills to, call the coyotes in there, the hard ones to call.
Right, for sure. Super cool. Super cool. Okay, so now we've talked about kind of some coyote behavior, but we keep going down the rabbit trail of how it relates to hunting, and we're filling in information. So, in terms of during the breeding season, and to try to get kind of back to that, January, February, which we're in, now, are you going to be using a lot of that kind of stuff currently because it's more effective, or is it, again, there is no set rules? Give me an idea of is it, or do you seasonally use particular strategies during different times of year, or more often, right? Because I know there's no set rules, but generally, Mark, during the winter I do a lot of this or whatever. Does that apply, or is it literally per setup?
I kind of feel like it's per setup. I used to only howl in the springtime, and there'll be guys that'll tell you. There's so many guys they've been doing it a long time and they've had success doing certain things. I used to only howl during the breeding season. I only thought that was effective, and guys I'd talked to said, "Oh yeah, you don't want to howl outside of breeding season." I howl all the time now, and I use all kinds of different howling. I either howl and call till one shows up, or I just chalk it up as, well, they didn't want to come today. And I use a lot of different sounds now, because I have.
Let me stop you just real quick. I don't want to forget to ask you this. How much of your strategy is based on FoxPro versus voice calls, and do you like one more than another, or again, is it just another tool in your toolbox?
I love the FoxPro. It adds so much to your arsenal because it's 400 sounds right there at your fingertips. I don't use all 400 of those sounds, but if I'm at a place where I want to try something different, I can. Maybe I got a coyote. Here's where I feel like it's really super cool is for the FoxPro and all the sounds that are in there. Say I got a coyote that's been called before, and he's sitting out there at 700-800 yards, and I can't shoot that far because I'm just not skilled enough. And I hope to be at some point. But I got him sitting out there, and I've tried everything with my hand calls, every sound that I know how to make with my hand calls. But I've got my FoxPro sitting over there in the weeds, and I'll just start throwing sounds at them. You know, sometimes they turn around and walk off, but other times they just decide, you know what, that one piques my interest. What is that? I'm going to go have a look. And sometimes it works, and you're excited. You're like, wow, I can't believe I called that coyote in. And maybe I threw every sound I had at him, but it's cool. It's a great tool. I still love hand calling probably more because it just feels like a better feeling of accomplishment. But man, the ability to have an electronic that you find a sound that maybe triggers their interest, and that's the one that works, then it's cool. It's money well spent at that point.
Well, that's interesting. So that makes it real doable for somebody that, you know, like I mean, I can yip how good and I can sound okay, and I've called in coyotes like that, but nowhere near do I have that arsenal. So, you know, that the FoxPro makes that kind of stuff, and people are going to think this is some kind of FoxPro, you know, infomercial, but it's just not. It's just the tool you use, and you know, especially me, because I don't have the skill level or the yearn to truly master all those different types of utterances or vocalizations and that sort of thing. You know, it lets me do it on the side and still do it well, as long as I have the woodsmanship and the strategy. So let me ask something that keeps kind of coming up. When you say you keep throwing different things at them, that's going to be a variance between trying to peak that territorial component, but also, you know, the food source component. And so on a food source level, what's your top 5, you know, critters that you see them react to the best to?
Well, a rabbit is going to be a coyote's main source of food across the country. I mean, they eat more rabbits than they eat anything else. You know, so a rabbit distress, and whether it be a cottontail distress or a jackrabbit distress, because of where I live, I play a lot of jackrabbit distress, just because I think that they sound a little more raspy and a little more desperate than most of the cottontails. But rabbits are the number one thing. Deer fawn distress is the second, which I feel like is an exceptional one.
And is that a seasonal thing? I mean, would you do a deer fawn distress right now?
I do. I definitely use deer fawn distress right now. In fact, I've been having as good a luck with deer fawn distress as anything. Period. I mean, and why I can say that is I've just coming off of my guiding my deer hunters, and I called deer in with a fawn distress, and I probably called in more coyotes this year than ever before using fawn distress while I'm trying to call deer in. And that was pretty cool because I got to see exactly how well it was going to work as I was going. You know, I was hunting deer, but I was you know what? That's killing these coyotes coming in. I'm going to be able to use that here in a couple more weeks when deer season's over, and it's been working great. I've been working over the coyotes pretty good with it.
Okay. So now we got rabbit, we got deer fawn. What are the other ones?
Any kind of bird distress sound. If you have like a prairie chicken or a pheasant, for me geographically, a pheasant distress works really good. Prairie chicken distress, even a chicken distress like a
barnyard chicken, right?
Yeah, barnyard chicken, domestic chicken. Those distress sounds work really good. Any rodent distress always works really well. And then one of my favorites is a antelope fawn distress. It's kind of a sorrowful little whining sound that it seems to bring them in really well. And in New Mexico, I've had exceptional luck with the antelope fawn distress across the state. I mean, that's something that those coyotes reacted really well to down there when I was hunting that area. Now, whether that's going to work now, I don't know, but You know, the 2 years that I was spending time in New Mexico calling, it worked really, really good both years.
Okay, so let's speak. And my guess is that the sex versus territorial, communications. Let's speak about it like this, right? I want to speak to it kind of from my reference point, which is, as a hunter, my primary focus is the critter I'm chasing that I'm going to eat. My secondary focus is it's kind of fun to help to control the predator populations and do that at the same time. So if I'm not in game and I hear what we've all heard before, which is that group of 5 or 6 coyotes fire up and wow, listen to that. Those guys are going nuts. How do I kill that sumbitch? Because that sounds like 5 or 6 of them all freaking out over. So speak to that direct scenario. Let's try to educate some novice coyote guys that are going to be in the woods and help them kill some coyotes and save some deer and elk. So that scenario is super common. How do we kill one of those, or 2 of those, or 3 of those?
Okay, yeah. So they sound off, and they're, if they're 1,000 yards from you and they sound off, then you probably need to get closer to them. But if they're
what is the distance gap you try to get? I mean, how close do you try to get? As close as you can, or, hey, anything over this doesn't really that effective?
If I'm in the scenario you're talking, if they're within 300 or 400 yards, you can have them in your lap in 20 seconds.
Awesome. Okay. How?
If you got your open reed cow call in your pocket, because you're elk hunting,
right?
And I've got one in my hand right here.
Right.
You just make some just some sounds in there, kind of similar to what you would do with your cow call, only you just make it a little bit more desperate, and that would sound something like this. And you do that for 3 seconds to 5 seconds, and then wait. Because if they're close to you, they're likely going to be there within, I don't know, just not very long, under a minute. They'll be there in under a minute.
Just that call and then shut up, right?
Yep, absolutely. Just that. And if you might try it 2 or 3 times if they don't come, just to make sure that they're not going to come.
And that's a rabbit in distress, right?
Rabbit distress. That's
okay.
It's a basic jackrabbit distress sound. It's real easy to do. Just bite down on your cow call. Like I said, if you're bow hunting, you've got it right there.
Right.
As you get more experienced with it, then you can do other things. But man,
I've always gone to the yip howl with it and had mixed results. When I've generally had the yip howl be effective, and again, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So I'll use the yip howl. When I find that yip howl works well is more of when I hear a single coyote, right?
That's exactly right. Yep.
Why is that?
They're more looking to see who's out there. Who's out there? A single coyote is more in tune to trying to figure out if there's somebody they can hang out with.
So would that be your novice's rule of thumb? Hey, dunderhead, kill a coyote while you're elk hunting. If you hear a single, yip howl at them, which, it's just a whoop, whoop, whoo, is all I do with a cow call. And then on the multiple pack, everybody going all nutso, just a rabbit squeal. Is that correct?
I would just go with a rabbit call. I mean, you can do the howl. I would always do the rabbit sound. Just that way. Yeah. Okay. It kind of is a less alarming. You don't want to kind of draw attention that if you're hunting elk and you decide, well, I'm going to try to throw a coyote hunt into this deal, because I got to be honest with you, anytime that I'm hunting and coyotes get involved, it automatically becomes a coyote hunt. I mean, it doesn't matter what else is going on, it automatically becomes a coyote hunt.
Okay, I get it.
I would just make I would start with just some rabbit distress sounds, because you still stand a chance of having your other quarry come in while you're trying to perform your hunt. And not that they get real worked up about coyotes, but some do. Some elk get. I've watched them coyotes walk right through herds of elk and not bother them at all. But right. As a whole, they may decide not to go over there. So yeah, I would just play a little bit of rabbit distress, pique their interest. you know, they're always looking for food. So, you know, you can always count on that being as good of a measure of a tool to use than as anything.
Right, right. Wow,
And
super cool.
the distress sound, um, is easier to make. I mean, you can make anything sound sorrowful. If you're trying to howl and you're not that, you know, you're not that good at it, um, you know, you might make a sound that they're like, huh, what the hell was that? And
Right, right.
they'll decide not to do it. But an easy distress sound on a open read call, you got it. I mean, that's all
Now,
you need.
I know we were talking, and then let's just a little sidelight, because again, this is my show, so I get to talk about whatever the hell I want. So let me ask you this: we were on a conference call the other day, and with our staff and everybody here at Got Hunts. I mean, people think all we do is hunt all the time, and we do a lot of hunting cumulatively. I mean, that's why we're in this. You know, we're blessed to do what we do. At the same time, we still all got to make a living and support our families, and nobody's getting rich over here. You know, I mean, what we do, and one of the things I commonly tell clients, and you've heard me say this 1,000 times, is I don't make enough money on any one hunt ever to give bad advice or to ever jeopardize my reputation. It is all about people knowing that they can come to one guy and ask about any hunt in the world and get the straight scoop. That's what I'm interested in my clients knowing, and how valuable that is for people. And so in that, and in trying to have some what we're striving for in this company, which is some company culture, right? When I say that, I mean, you live in Nebraska, Trevor lives in Texas, Russ lives, you know, 15 miles from me, but I don't see him as often you would think. Corey lives 2 hours away from me. Who else am I forgetting? Chris lives in Utah. You know, and anyway, we're all over the place. And the reality is that we don't get a chance to all get together very often, and so we're trying to organize a bear hunt and do that together, just for the camaraderie of it, for the culture of it, to have some unanimity in the company, if that's a word, which it isn't. But anyway, I made it up. But anyway, so what I guess I mean is that when we were talking about that, you mentioned that one of the things you feel like you're pretty darn skilled at is calling bears. So I know the guys listening in, their ears just perked up, and gals. I keep saying guys, and by the way, gals that listen to my show, I'm sorry. I really am not a chauvinist or a sexist or anything. It's just kind of what comes out. So I'll try to do better at that if I've offended you ladies. By the way, too, a future guest is going to be a gal. So we're going to have the first interviewee is going to be a gal, and she's Jen the Archer, and we're set up to have her on the podcast here in a couple of weeks. She's really pretty, and she's a good bow hunter and kind of interesting gal. But anyway, I digress once again. So Clay, let me ask you, when you call bears, tell us about that.
Well, calling bears is a little more difficult. It seems like to me, I haven't had I can't say I haven't had tremendous success calling bears. Sometimes I've had really good success calling bears, but other times I'll do the same thing over and over and over and over, and it just doesn't work. But I only specifically try to make a very sorrowful, kind of just a loud crying sound that either mimics a jackrabbit / bear cub type of a distress sound. And it needs to be really loud and really sorrowful. I have found, though, it's always better if I can see the bears, and if you never lay off the call. You just call constantly you might call constantly for 20, 30 minutes. Or I've heard of some guys calling for 45 minutes. I can't, my wind doesn't last that long. But, 20 plus minutes just raising hell on the call. A lot of times they'll come. And if you can see them, you can get an idea of whether or not they're going to come. Just say you're in a heavily timbered area and you're walking along and you see a bear down a clear cut, and he's maybe quarter of a mile or half a mile away. You could probably get that bear to come. I don't know if I've called bears from farther because I don't know. I don't know that I have. Because if I couldn't see them, I didn't normally try to call them.
And so let me ask you this. Of bears that you've been able to see, what would you say the percentage that you can call, that guys can kind of expect to be able to call in out of that? I mean, what has your experience been? 50-50? What?
Yeah, under 1,000 yards, probably 75% of those bears came to the call.
No shit. Close?
Yeah, they
like
would come.
bow killable?
Oh yeah, absolutely bow killable.
Huh. Super
They
cool.
come in there. I don't know if aggressive is the word, but they're darn sure they're ready for action when they come in like that. You know, they're looking for, they're either looking for a wounded cub or they're looking. You know, I don't know what the sound is. Some guys make a sound that they say is a bear cub distress. Guys that are much better at it than I am, and they say it's a bear cub distress, and those bears definitely come in and they seem like they're more on the fight. I'm by no means an expert on calling bears. Like I said, I've had success at it. I've called in quite a few bears, mainly just messing around with them, more so than killing them, because a lot of times, obviously, it was just hard to get tags for such a long time in Colorado, but that's a whole different story. But yeah, mainly it was just messing around with them. So we just call them in and take pictures of them and fool around with them a little bit and let them go on their merry way. You didn't want somebody getting hurt, but if you can see them, you can kind of tell whether or not, if they take off, obviously they're not coming. You just stop. But if they start showing some interest, you just keep laying on the call and you just keep calling and calling and calling and calling and calling. And one of my guides, he just would go. I made a hand call, a closed reed call out of Calhorn a few years ago, and it was like the magic bear caller. I gave it to my guide to try out. He called in a ton of bears during that year, and that was amazing. I mean, he was calling them in left and right. I didn't have that kind of success, and I never got to actually go with him to hear what his cadence was. And I would always forget to ask him whenever we were talking about hunting later. So I never got to actually hear what the sound was that he was doing with my call.
Interesting.
So that was a bummer. I should have done that.
Well,
but
get to it, dude.
Yeah, I need to figure that out. I've got the call. I've got the call right here.
Okay. All right. So do you want to give an example of the bear call?
Yeah, let me see if I can get that sound made here. Where's that sound call right there? And I just think it's a kind of a loud, sorrowful sound.
I guess. It sounds like somebody's pulling the baby's toes off.
And apparently, maybe that's the sound. I don't know. It's just, bears are always hungry, and so I just attribute it as they want to eat.
I get it.
So that's
interesting. So let me get down to the last two questions. I gotta, so let me get down to that. So one is frequency, because you just mentioned it with bears, just to keep going on and on and on. One of the problems I've always had in the past when I've hunted with other people, that I've never really hunted with somebody for coyotes that I feel like really knows what they're doing. And when I did, it was back in the day where you played a tape, right, on like a ghetto blaster. Do you remember that? Sounds dumb, but that's, do you remember those days?
Oh yeah, I definitely remember those days.
So I was always going, holy shit, are they ever going to turn that thing off? There's nothing coming, right? And it just felt so unnatural for something to go on for 10 minutes solid, because I just don't think it would be that way in nature.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I personally, I break up my calling sequences. I might start my standoff with a light, super low volume calling sequence of a rodent distress or a real quiet rabbit distress sound. Just there's lots of times you walk into a stand, the coyote might be 150 or 200 yards from you, laying in the grass. You start blazing away with the loudest thing you got in your arsenal. That guy jumps up and runs out of there because it scares the hell out of him.
Right.
Or you cut loose with a really loud howl to start your standoff, and that coyote's laying out there, same thing, a couple hundred yards. It scares him because he's sleeping. He jumps up and runs out of there. You don't ever get a shot at it. So I personally like to start quiet and then kind of, maybe a minute, 30 seconds to a minute of quiet kind of coaxer sounds, and then I'll wait 2 minutes. And then I might go into 2 sequences of a minute each, just a mid-volume rabbit distress, just wah, wah, wah for a minute or so. And then if nothing has shown up by then, I maybe throw some howling out there, maybe give them the idea. And I mean, we're people. We analyze this like we think we know what the hell they're thinking, but in the grand scheme of things, who knows? They're either hungry or they're not, or they want to fight or they don't, or they want to screw or they don't. I mean, it is what it is. I've watched coyotes just lay out there and watch me call everything I got at them. 600-700 yards.
What is that jack off doing?
Yeah, they know they're out of gun reach, so they just pick their head up and look, and they're like, "Oh hell, I'm not going over there. I know who." But eventually, and I usually call. Sometimes I call for 15 minutes, and sometimes I call for 25 minutes. When I lived in Colorado, I made my stands a lot longer because it just seems like the coyotes would come at the 30 to 40 minute mark, and I had really good success calling in the mountains. It just seemed like it took longer. I also walked a lot versus drive to hunting areas. I hiked primarily, but to get back to the sequence, I really feel like if you start low, you work your way up, and if say you're only going to go make a couple of sets a day in the maybe the evening or whatever, and you're hunting areas that are you're not going to be back to for, I'll play full volume. I'll call really loud because then I want to reach out and see what's out there. Coyotes can hear exceptionally well. You could call them from a couple miles if the situation is right, and so I'll call super loud there towards the end. And then I might just wait 5-10 minutes at the end of my stand if I'm by myself and I'm not in a contest or something like that, and I got time. I'll just sit and wait, because sometimes those coyotes they'll just show up, and they'll know right where the sound was coming from, and they'll just make their way in quietly, and check it out. Mm-hmm. What you hope on every set is that they come under 5 to 10 minute mark, and you get to make a lot of stands, and you get to shoot a lot of coyotes. But
interesting. How many, by the way, in one weekend how many have you taken as far as like the most, like in a contest?
In the contest, I actually just in the national contest in Rawlins, Wyoming in November, my partner and I killed 15 in a day and a half and finished second in that contest.
Wow, that's cool.
And so that was really cool. I'd never gotten to hunt that contest before because I was usually guiding elk hunters. So it was the first time I'd ever hunted it. We hunted ground that we'd never even seen before. So we were pretty stoked that we killed 15. I actually shot 2 others that got away. But the competition was stiff. The guys that won it killed 22, but I'll take second to those guys anytime. They're really skilled callers, and it was fun. It was a fun hunt.
That's super cool. Well, hey, one last thing, and I'm going to kind of end on this, is that for the guys out there that, you mentioned to shoot well, right? We have what I believe is the best shooting course for our clients in the country available today. Now, there's a lot of them out there, the long-range shooting, and I think what's important to realize is that there's a big difference between long-range bench shooting and long-range hunting. And I think there's ethical questions guys have to ask themselves because of what it truly takes to shoot those kind of distances that you're seeing guys do in variable terrains versus on a bench, after your third shot and you learned and all those different things, right? And not that I'm the guru there, and I'm not. But I do believe that it, like any other part of the hunting sports, that facet of it can be abused or be a really good tool that people stay within parameters that are what they should be, which is mindfulness of the ethics of the harvest of game and not risking woundings, right? I mean, woundings are going to happen. They're a part of being a predator. They are for a cougar, a coyote, and us too. So to say that that doesn't exist, you know, in what we do is ignorance, and it's deceit. I feel frustrated with how politically correct we have to stay in this arena. It's a realistic part of being a predator. I'm going to leave it at that. At the same time, we have a human intelligence that has the ability to have the ethics with this long range shooting, but training yourself to shoot longer is just another facet, and we have a tremendous course that guys can take where they have 3 days, and it's 1 day of class, 2 days of shooting off the bench, and then the third day's in the field, basically like shooting a 18 round golf course where you're shooting different ranges, different elevations, different windages, different temperatures, and all the variables that you're going to find in the field. And it's a great course. So any of you that are listening to this, it's out of Utah. They put courses together specifically for our clients. It's all on private ground. It's at a 5-star lodge. It's a little bit more expensive than most of them that are out there, but not that much more. And I think you'd have a hard time finding a better one. So anyway, that's something that can go with it there. And Clay, I think we're all going to take that course ourselves one of these days as well, because I think it's just fun to go out and learn how to shoot guns better, and to get those.
I definitely want to do that, because that's how come I've had to become a good caller, because I'm not a great shot.
Right. It's the same with me. I mean, not that I can't speak to the fact that I'm a great rifle shot, because I'm not. I've been shooting bows too long. I feel a gun in my hands feels unfamiliar, to be honest. At least you have familiarity with it. I don't shoot much stuff with a gun. In fact, the deer that I shot this year would be now my 4th animal that I've shot with a rifle in going on 17 years. And you would have laughed, Clay. I mean, so I make this big stealthy move in on this deer. I saw him work into this little country. I didn't quite see him well enough to really judge his quality. I just knew he was a good representative, and that's all I was interested in because of the way this hunt was. Moved in on him. He had kind of moved to a different location. All of a sudden, he saw me, I saw him. He was at about 200, and he started on the move. And I went back to, I've been shooting guns since I was a kid, so I went back to that, put it on his shoulder, squeezed the trigger, and hit him the first shot. Now, I think I gutted him because he kind of humped up and just looked sick, didn't look heart punched. And I know he wasn't, because of the next part of the story is that, dude, I instantly turned into a 12-year-old again, and I unloaded my gun as rapidly as humanly freaking possible, and I don't think I hit him one more time. Right? It was just like ka-ding, 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 ka-ding. So then I reload, I put 3 more in, I get a solid rest, I put one behind his shoulder, and I hit him. But then again, I clicked into my 12-year-old, and I rolled off 3 more rounds just as fast as I could. So I'm still susceptible to the fever. I don't have great instincts with a gun in my hand anymore, but it was fun, and it was fun to take him down quick still, though. It wasn't like this big, long, anguishing death or any of that stuff. It was just, if somebody would have been watching me that knows what they were doing and shooting a rifle well, they would have probably laughed at me, but it is what it is. So
yeah, that can happen. I to this day, and I've killed hundreds of coyotes, and to this day, I still get shaky when I call in a coyote and shoot them, and get to watch them on a long approach. Even watching them on the long approach, I'll still get excited, almost to the point of buck fever that you have to quell so that you can make the shot. But that's why I do it. I mean, I do it because it's fun. I love it. I love trying to trick them, and if once you've done it once and brought them into the call, you're hooked. I mean, I've never known anybody that doesn't get hooked at some level on calling coyotes.
I bet you're right. You got me fired up, brother. I'm gonna take Jakin out this winter and do some, because I think that'd be a lot of fun. Thank you so much for all your time and energy and expertise and being willing just to share your secret sauce with us. I appreciate it, and so thank you very much, Clay. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me. It was really a pleasure.
Super cool, super cool. Well, you guys and gals, remember, you can find us at gothunts.com. So it's like the slogan Got Milk, GOTHUNTS.com. If you're curious to ask Clay direct questions on this, don't forget he's on our website. You can locate him there by looking at our staff, and his name and contact information's there. Whether it's to go hunt coyotes directly with Clay, he does that. Whether it's to learn more information about, what he knows, great. But don't forget, he is a wealth of information on North American elk and deer, has good global experience as well, and is tapped into all our inventory here at Outdoors International and can help you with anything. You can see he's a good dude. He's humble. He's super knowledgeable. He's a real deal hunter. At the same time, he's the guy you can call to go start checking off that bucket list. So, Clay, I feel blessed to know you. I feel blessed for your time. Folks out there, thank you so much for yours as well. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget, look us up. Make sure you like us and write a review on iTunes. Apple has a tendency to be a little bit snotty with how they do things, and one of the big things that they like to see is people writing reviews. So if you liked this one or you like any of our other podcasts, write reviews. It'll put us up there further. We'll get more listeners and we'll have better guests on. That's what it comes down to. So if you like what we're doing, share it. So thank you guys so much. Thank you, Clay. Thanks for listening. This is Mark Warnke, Outdoors International, GotHunts.com, signing out.